The morning sun cast long shadows across the ancient stone corridors of Windsor Castle. As William hurried through the halls, his footsteps echoing against the walls that had witnessed centuries of royal history. He had received an urgent message. Just an hour earlier, his father, King Charles, wanted to see him immediately. The tone of the message was different this time, carrying a weight that made William's stomach twist with worry. As he approached the private study where his father spent most of his quiet moments, William noticed the unusual silence that seemed to hang in the air. The usual bustle of palace staff was subdued, their voices hushed as they moved about their duties. Even the guards standing at attention seemed more solemn than usual, their eyes filled with a gravity that William couldn't quite understand. King Charles sat behind his mahogany desk, surrounded by stacks of official papers and personal letters. His silver hair caught the morning light streaming through the tall windows, and William was struck by how much older his father looked than just a few weeks ago. The king's hands, which had always been steady and sure, now trembled slightly as he reached for a leather-bound folder. "William, my son." King Charles spoke softly, his voice carrying both warmth and something else, something that sounded almost like farewell. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Please sit down. We have much to discuss, and I'm afraid time is not something I have in abundance anymore." William felt his heart skip a beat at these words. He had suspected something was wrong with his father's health, but hearing it spoken aloud made it terrifyingly real. He took his usual seat across from the desk, the same chair he had occupied during countless conversations about duty, responsibility, and the future of the monarchy. The king opened the folder and pulled out several documents, his movements careful and deliberate. William noticed his father's wedding ring catching the light as he moved, a simple band that had symbolized decades of love and commitment. The sight of it reminded William of all the family moments they had shared, all the lessons his father had taught him about leadership and compassion. "The doctors have given me their assessment," King Charles continued, his voice steady despite the devastating words. "The cancer has progressed faster than we hoped. They estimate I have perhaps 6 months, maybe less." He paused, allowing William to absorb this information before continuing. "I've made peace with this news, son. What concerns me now is ensuring that everything I've worked for, everything our family represents, continues long after I'm gone." William felt the room spinning slightly as the full impact of his father's words hit him. He had always known this day would come eventually, but he had imagined it would be many years in the future. The thought of losing his father, his mentor and his king all at once seemed overwhelming. Yet he could see in his father's eyes the same strength and determination that had guided the monarchy through decades of change and challenge. King Charles reached across the desk and placed his hand over William's, the touch warm and reassuring despite the trembling. "I know this is difficult to hear, and I know you feel unprepared, but I have complete faith in you, William. You have the heart of a true king, and more importantly, you have the wisdom to lead with both strength and compassion." The two men sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the future settling between them like a heavy blanket. Outside the windows, life in the castle grounds continued as normal. Gardeners tended to the rose beds, tourists gathered for the changing of the guard, and children played in the nearby park. The contrast between the normalcy outside and the monumental conversation happening in this room felt surreal to William. "There's something else," King Charles said, his voice taking on a more urgent tone. "Something I need to ask of you, something that goes beyond the normal duties of kingship. It's a request that I've been thinking about for months, something that means more to me than any state ceremony or official function." William leaned forward, his full attention focused on his father's words. He could see that whatever his father was about to ask, it came from the deepest part of his heart. The king's eyes, which had always been filled with wisdom and kindness, now held an intensity that William had rarely seen before. "This request isn't about politics or protocol," King Charles continued. "It's about family, about healing old wounds, and about showing the world that even in our final moments we can choose love over pride, forgiveness over resentment." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts and his courage. "What I'm about to ask of you will challenge everything you think you know about our family's history, and it may change how you see your role as future king. William felt his pulse quicken. His father had always been a man of surprises, someone who challenged traditions when necessary, and who believed deeply in the power of reconciliation and healing. But something in his tone suggested that whatever he was about to request would be unlike anything William had ever imagined. The king picked up a photograph from his desk, one that William had seen many times before, a picture of the family from years past, including faces that were no longer part of their daily lives. As his father held the photograph, William could see the mix of sadness and hope in his eyes, and he began to understand that his father's final request would involve reaching across the divides that had split their family apart. King Charles set the photograph down gently and looked directly into William's eyes. The silence in the room felt heavy with anticipation as William waited for his father to speak. Outside, he could hear the distant sound of church bells ringing the hour, marking time in a way that suddenly felt precious and fleeting. "William, I want you to bring Harry home," King Charles said quietly, his words landing like stones dropped into still water. "I want our family to be whole again before I die. I want to see my sons together, standing side by side the way it should have always been." William felt his breath catch in his throat. The relationship between him and his younger brother had been strained for years, with misunderstandings and hurt feelings, creating a distance that seemed impossible to bridge. The media had made their separation even more difficult, turning every interaction into a public spectacle and every silence into a story of family division. "Father, you know how complicated things have become," William said carefully, his mind racing through all the reasons why such a reunion might be difficult. "Harry has made his choices. He's built a new life, and I'm not sure he would want to come back even for this." King Charles nodded slowly, showing that he understood the complexity of what he was asking. His fingers drummed softly against the desk as he considered his words. "I know it won't be easy, son. I know there have been words spoken that can't be taken back, and actions that have caused deep pain on both sides. But I also know that underneath all of that hurt, there are two brothers who once loved each other more than anything in the world." William remembered those earlier days his father was referring to, the times when he and Harry had been inseparable, when they had supported each other through their mother's death and the challenges of growing up in the public eye. They had shared secrets, jokes, and dreams about the future. The memory of Harry's laugh, genuine and carefree, suddenly filled William's mind with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. "I've been thinking about this for months," King Charles continued, his voice growing stronger with conviction. "I've watched both of my sons struggle with pain that could have been avoided if we had all been better at communicating, better at understanding each other's perspectives. I don't want to leave this world knowing that my death might be the only thing that brings you together again." The king stood up slowly and walked to the window, gazing out at the gardens where William and Harry had played as children. The rose bushes their grandmother had planted were in full bloom, their red and white flowers creating a carpet of color that seemed to glow in the morning sun. "Do you remember when you and Harry used to race through those gardens?" he asked, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. William joined his father at the window, the memories flooding back with unexpected intensity. He could almost see their younger selves running between the hedges, Harry always trying to keep up with his older brother's longer legs, both of them covered in dirt and laughing until their sides hurt. Their mother would watch from this very window, her face bright with joy as she observed her son's carefree happiness. "I remember," William said softly. "Harry always insisted he could run faster than me, even though he was smaller. He never gave up trying." "That's exactly the spirit I'm talking about," King Charles said, turning back to his son. "Harry never gave up on anything that mattered to him. His stubbornness was both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. But it also means that if he truly understood what this means to me, what it means to our family, he wouldn't give up on making it right." William felt the weight of his father's request settling on his shoulders. He understood that this wasn't just about a family reunion. It was about healing, about showing the world that love could overcome pride, and about ensuring that his father's final months would be filled with peace instead of regret. "What if he says no?" William asked, voicing his deepest fear. "What if too much has happened and he's moved too far away from us to come back?" King Charles placed his hand on William's shoulder, the gesture both comforting and strengthening. "Then at least we will have tried. At least we will know that we extended our hand in love and forgiveness. But I have faith that Harry's heart is still connected to ours, even if his pride has built walls around it. The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. King Charles's private secretary entered with a worried expression, carrying a folder of urgent papers that required the king's attention. The reminder of royal duties and responsibilities brought William back to the practical realities of their situation. "Your Majesty," the secretary said respectfully, "the Prime Minister is waiting for your call regarding the state dinner next month." King Charles nodded but didn't move toward his desk immediately. Instead, he continued to look at William with eyes full of hope and determination. "Think about what I've asked, son. Think about what it would mean, not just to me, but to the future of our family and our institution. Sometimes the most important royal duty is simply being a good brother." As the secretary waited patiently by the door, William realized that his father was asking him to embark on perhaps the most challenging mission of his life. It wasn't about politics or diplomacy with foreign nations. It was about reaching across an ocean and years of hurt feelings, to touch the heart of someone who had once been his closest friend and greatest ally. "I'll need time to figure out how to approach him," William said finally. "And I'll need to talk to Catherine about this. She's always understood both Harry and me better than we understand ourselves sometimes." King Charles smiled, the first genuine smile William had seen from him all morning. "Catherine has always been wise about family matters. Her perspective will be invaluable." He paused and then added with quiet intensity, "William, I'm not asking you to fix everything that's gone wrong between you and Harry. I'm just asking you to open the door and invite him to walk through it. Sometimes that's all it takes to begin healing." That evening, William found himself walking through the familiar halls of Kensington Palace, his mind churning with thoughts about his father's request. The weight of the conversation seemed to grow heavier with each step, and he knew he needed to share this burden with Catherine before it consumed him entirely. The palace felt different tonight, quieter, more solemn, as if the very walls understood the gravity of what lay ahead. Catherine was in their private sitting room, reading a bedtime story to their youngest child. William paused in the doorway, watching this scene of domestic tranquility and feeling a pang of longing for the simpler times when family meant just the people in this room. The soft glow of the reading lamp cast warm shadows across Catherine's face as she used different voices for each character, making their child giggle with delight. After tucking their little one into bed, Catherine joined William in their study, immediately sensing his troubled mood. She had always been able to read his emotions with an accuracy that sometimes surprised him, and tonight was no different. Without saying a word, she sat beside him on the sofa and took his hand in hers, her touch providing the comfort he desperately needed. "It's about your father, isn't it?" she asked gently, her voice filled with the kind of understanding that came from years of marriage and shared challenges. "I could see something was wrong when you came home this afternoon." William nodded, struggling to find the words to explain the complexity of what King Charles had asked of him. "He's dying, Catherine. The doctors say 6 months at most." The words felt strange coming out of his mouth, making the reality of his father's condition impossible to deny anymore. Catherine's face showed the shock and sadness that William had been feeling all day. She had grown to love King Charles as a father figure, and the thought of losing him was devastating. But William could see in her eyes that she was already thinking ahead, already preparing herself to be the support that both he and their children would need in the difficult months ahead. "What did he ask of you?" Catherine inquired softly, knowing that there was more to William's distress than just the medical diagnosis. William took a deep breath and told her everything, about his father's desire to see his sons reunited, about the hope in his eyes when he spoke of healing old wounds, and about the seemingly impossible task of reaching out to Harry after years of silence and hurt feelings. As he spoke, Catherine listened without interruption, her expression growing more thoughtful with each detail. When William finished, Catherine was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he had shared. Finally, she spoke with the wisdom that had made her such an invaluable partner in both their personal and public lives. "He's right, you know. Harry should be here for this. Whatever has happened between you two, your father deserves to have his family together in his final months. But what if Harry refuses?" William asked, voicing the fear that had been haunting him since the morning conversation. "What if he's too angry, too hurt, or too settled in his new life to care about what's happening here?" Catherine turned to face him fully, her eyes bright with determination. "Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But William, You can't let fear of rejection stop you from trying. Your father isn't asking you to solve everything. He's asking you to extend an invitation. Harry will have to make his own choice about whether to accept it. William felt some of the tension in his shoulders begin to ease as Catherine's calm perspective helped him see the situation more clearly. She had always been the voice of reason in their relationship, the one who could find practical solutions to seemingly impossible problems. "How do I even begin?" William asked. "We haven't spoken in over a year, and our last conversation didn't end well. I don't even know if he'll take my call." Catherine stood up and walked to their desk, pulling out a piece of writing paper and a pen. "Maybe a phone call isn't the right approach," she suggested. "Maybe this kind of message needs to be written down, needs to be something Harry can read and think about without feeling pressured to respond immediately." William watched as Catherine sat down at the desk, her mind clearly working through the possibilities. "You could write him a letter," she continued. "Not an official royal communication, but something personal, something from one brother to another. Tell him about your father's condition. Tell him about the request, but most importantly, tell him how much you miss him." The idea of writing to Harry felt both terrifying and right. William remembered how they used to communicate as children, sometimes passing notes to each other during boring official functions, sharing jokes and observations that only brothers would understand. A letter would give him the chance to choose his words carefully, to express emotions that might be too difficult to voice over the phone. "What if he doesn't respond?" William asked, though he was already beginning to see the wisdom in Catherine's suggestion. "Then at least you'll know you tried," Catherine replied, echoing King Charles's earlier words. "And if he does respond, if he's willing to listen, then you'll have opened the door to something beautiful." Catherine pulled out her phone and began searching for something. After a moment, she showed William a photograph she had saved, a picture from several years ago showing William, Harry, and their father laughing together at a polo match. In the photo, Harry's arm was draped casually over William's shoulder, and both brothers were looking at their father with expressions of pure affection and admiration. "This is what your father remembers," Catherine said softly. "This is what he wants to see again before he dies. Not the formal, distant relationship that you and Harry have now, but the genuine love that's always existed between you." William stared at the photograph, feeling a rush of emotion that he had been trying to suppress for years. In that captured moment, he could see the Harry he had grown up with, the brother who had stood by his side through their mother's funeral, who had supported him through his military training, and who had been genuinely excited about his engagement to Catherine. "I'll write to him," William said finally, his voice steady with new resolve. "I'll tell him about father and I'll ask him to come home, not as a prince returning to royal duty, but as a son who deserves to say goodbye to his father, and as a brother who deserves the chance to heal old wounds." Catherine smiled and kissed his forehead gently. "I think that's exactly what your father was hoping you would say. And William, whatever happens next, whatever Harry decides, you can know that you did the right thing. You chose love over pride, and that's what real leadership looks like." As William began to draft the letter in his mind, he felt a sense of peace settling over him. Tomorrow he would put pen to paper and reach across the ocean to touch his brother's heart. Tonight he would hold on to the hope that family bonds were stronger than the forces that had tried to break them apart. 3 days later, William sat in his private office with a blank piece of personal stationery before him, the weight of unwritten words pressing down on his chest. He had started and discarded several drafts, each one feeling either too formal or too emotional, too demanding or too distant. The morning light filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across his desk as he struggled to find the right tone for perhaps the most important letter he would ever write. Catherine had encouraged him to write from his heart, but William found that his heart was a complicated place when it came to Harry. There was love there, certainly, but also hurt, disappointment, and a deep sadness for what their relationship had become. He wanted to reach his brother, but he also wanted to protect himself from the possibility of rejection. Finally, William picked up his pen and began to write, letting the words flow without overthinking them. "Dear Harry," he started, and immediately felt the intimacy of using his brother's familiar name instead of any formal title. "I hope this letter finds you well and happy. I'm writing to you not as the Prince of Wales, but as your brother, because what I have to tell you is about family, not duty. William paused, reading those opening lines and feeling that they struck the right tone. He continued, his handwriting flowing more smoothly as he found his rhythm. "Father is sick, Harry, very sick. The doctors have told us that he has perhaps 6 months to live, maybe less. I know this news will be as devastating to you as it was to me, because despite everything that has happened between us, I know how much you love him." The words felt heavy as he wrote them, each letter carrying the weight of their father's mortality. William could picture Harry reading these words, could imagine the shock and pain that would cross his brother's face. He hoped that Harry would see past any lingering anger to the urgency of what William was trying to communicate. "Father asked me to write to you," William continued. "His final request is simple but profound. He wants to see his sons together again before he dies. He wants our family to be whole, wants to know that after he's gone, we'll have each other to lean on. I know this might seem impossible given everything that has happened, but I'm asking you to consider it, not for protocol or public relations, but for him." William set down his pen for a moment and walked to the window, looking out at the same gardens where he and Harry had played as children. The memories came flooding back. The way Harry used to follow him everywhere, always eager to be included in whatever game or adventure William had planned. They had been a team once, united against the world's expectations and the loneliness that came with royal life. Returning to his desk, William picked up his pen again and wrote about those memories. "Do you remember the summer when we built that fort in the old oak tree at Highgrove? We spent weeks collecting branches and making plans, and when it was finally finished, we declared it our secret kingdom where no one could tell us what to do or how to behave. We made a pact that day that we would always have each other's backs, no matter what." The memory brought a smile to William's face, and he could feel some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Writing about their shared past reminded him of the foundation of love that still existed beneath all the complications and misunderstandings. "I know I haven't been the brother you needed me to be," William wrote, his handwriting becoming more urgent as he delved into the harder truths. "I know I sometimes let duty overshadow family, let protocol come before understanding. I've made mistakes, said things I wish I could take back, and failed to support you when you needed it most. But Harry, I've never stopped loving you, and I've never stopped missing the friendship we used to have." William's hand trembled slightly as he wrote these words, knowing that he was making himself vulnerable in a way that felt both necessary and terrifying. He was admitting his own faults, acknowledging his role in their estrangement, and opening himself up to the possibility that Harry might not be ready to forgive. "I'm not asking you to fix everything with one visit," he continued. "I'm not expecting us to go back to the way things were as if nothing has happened. I'm simply asking you to come home and say goodbye to our father, to let him see his sons standing together one last time. After that, what happens between us is something we can figure out together, without the pressure of public scrutiny or family expectations." William paused again, thinking about how to end the letter. He wanted to strike a balance between hope and respect for Harry's autonomy, between urgency and patience. Finally, he wrote, "I know you've built a beautiful life where you are, and I'm not asking you to give that up. I'm asking you to add to it by reconnecting with the family that still loves you, still needs you, and still believes that you have an important role to play in our story." As William signed the letter, he felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. He had said what needed to be said, had opened his heart in a way that felt both scary and right. Now came the hardest part, waiting for Harry's response, not knowing if his brother would see this as an opportunity for healing or as an intrusion into the life he had worked so hard to build. William sealed the letter in an envelope and wrote Harry's address carefully, remembering the strange feeling of writing to his brother at a foreign address, in a country that had become Harry's new home. The distance between them suddenly felt immense, not just in miles but in the different worlds they now inhabited. Before he could second-guess himself, William called for his private secretary and asked him to arrange for the letter to be delivered personally and discreetly. No media attention, no royal protocols, just one brother reaching out to another in a time of family crisis. As he watched his secretary leave with the letter, William felt as though he had just taken the first step on a journey that could either heal his family or confirm that some wounds were too deep to mend. But he also felt his father's pride in his decision and Catherine's support strengthening his resolve. Whatever happened next, he had chosen love over fear, and that felt like the right place to start. 5 days passed without any response from Harry, and William found himself checking his phone constantly, jumping at every notification, and feeling his heart sink each time it turned out to be something routine. The waiting was almost unbearable, made worse by the knowledge that every day that passed was another day closer to losing their father. King Charles had asked about the letter twice, his eyes filled with hope each time, and William had to gently explain that these things took time. Catherine noticed William's growing anxiety and did her best to keep him distracted with family activities and royal duties, but she could see that his mind was always elsewhere, always wondering if today would be the day Harry responded. The children seemed to sense the tension too, staying closer to their parents and asking fewer questions than usual. On the 6th day, William was in a meeting with his private secretary about upcoming engagements when his personal phone buzzed with an unknown international number. His heart jumped, but he forced himself to finish the meeting before checking the message. When he finally looked at his phone, he saw a simple text that made his hands shake. "Can we talk?" William immediately stepped away from his official duties and found a private room where he could call his brother without interruption. His fingers trembled as he dialed the number, and when Harry's familiar voice answered on the second ring, William felt a rush of emotion that nearly overwhelmed him. "William," Harry said simply, his voice carrying a mixture of sadness, surprise, and something that might have been relief. The sound of his brother's voice after so many months of silence hit William like a physical force, bringing back years of shared memories and conversations. "Harry," William replied, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Thank you for calling. I wasn't sure you would." There was a pause, and William could hear the sound of Harry moving, perhaps walking to a more private location. When Harry spoke again, his voice was quieter, more vulnerable. "I got your letter. I've read it about 20 times, actually. I couldn't believe what you were telling me about Father." William closed his eyes, hearing the pain in his brother's voice and wishing he could reach through the phone to provide some comfort. "I know it's a shock. It was for me too. The doctors are doing everything they can, but how long have you known?" Harry interrupted, and William could hear a note of hurt in the question, as if Harry was wondering whether the family had kept this information from him intentionally. "We only found out a few days before I wrote to you," William assured him quickly. "Father wanted to tell you himself, but he asked me to reach out first to see if you might be willing to come home." Another pause, longer this time. William waited, knowing that Harry needed time to process everything. Finally, Harry spoke again, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been angry for so long, William. Angry at you, at the institution, at the way everything happened. But hearing about Father, it puts everything in perspective, doesn't it?" William felt tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. "It does. Harry, I meant everything I said in that letter. I know I haven't been the brother you needed, and I know there are things we need to work through. But right now all I can think about is how much Father wants to see you, how much he misses you." "I miss him too," Harry admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "I miss all of you. I've been trying to convince myself that I was better off without all the complications, but the truth is you're still my family. You're still the people who knew me before the world decided who I should be." William felt hope blooming in his chest for the first time in days. "Does that mean you'll consider coming home?" Harry was quiet for a moment, and William could almost hear him thinking through all the practical and emotional complications that such a visit would involve. "I need to talk to my wife," Harry said finally. "This affects her too, and our children. But William, I want you to know that I want to come. I want to see Father and I want to see you. I'm just scared." "Scared of what?" William asked gently. "Scared that I've been away too long, that too much has changed. Scared that I won't know how to be part of the family anymore. Scared that coming back might make everything more complicated instead of better." Harry's honesty was raw and painful, but it also felt like the beginning of real communication between them. William took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Harry, you don't have to be anything other than yourself. You don't have to fit back into old roles or pretend that nothing has changed. Father just wants to see his son, and I just want to see my brother. Everything else we can figure out as we go." "What about the media?" Harry asked, voicing one of the practical concerns that William had been thinking about as well. "They'll turn it into a circus. They'll want to analyze every gesture, every conversation." William had already given this considerable thought. "We'll handle that. Father's health situation gives us a legitimate reason to ask for privacy, and I think even the most aggressive media outlets will respect that to some degree. Besides, what matters is the time we have together as a family. Not what anyone else thinks about it, Harry sighed. And William could hear him walking again, perhaps pacing as he tried to work through his emotions. I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but I've missed home. I've missed the places where we grew up, the people who knew us when we were just kids trying to figure out our place in the world. Those places are still here, William said softly, and the people who love you are still here too. We've all changed, we've all grown, but the foundation is still solid. Father made sure of that. Give me 2 days, Harry said suddenly, his voice becoming more decisive. I need to arrange things here, talk to my family, make some plans. But William, tell Father that I'm coming home. Tell him that his sons will be together again. William felt tears streaming down his face as he heard these words. I will, Harry, thank you. This means everything to him, and it means everything to me too. William, Harry said, his voice softer now. I'm sorry it took Father being sick for us to have this conversation. We should have done this a long time ago. We're doing it now, William replied. That's what matters. Harry, I love you. I've always loved you, even when we weren't speaking. I love you too, brother, Harry said, and William could hear the smile in his voice. I'll see you soon. After hanging up, William sat in the quiet room for several minutes, letting the full impact of the conversation sink in. His brother was coming home. Their father's final wish was going to be fulfilled. The healing that King Charles had hoped for was beginning, and despite all the challenges that lay ahead, William felt a sense of peace that he hadn't experienced in years. 2 weeks later, William stood at the private entrance of Windsor Castle, his heart racing with a mixture of excitement and nervousness that he hadn't felt since his wedding day. Harry's plane had landed an hour ago, and William had insisted on meeting his brother personally rather than sending palace staff. This reunion needed to be intimate, private, and real, not orchestrated by protocol officers or documented by official photographers. Catherine stood beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm in a gesture of support and solidarity. She had been instrumental in planning Harry's return, working behind the scenes to ensure that the visit would be as comfortable and pressure-free as possible. They had arranged for Harry and his family to stay in one of the private residences on the Windsor grounds, giving them space and privacy while keeping them close to King Charles. The black car rounded the corner, and William felt his breath catch in his throat. After all the phone calls, all the planning, all the anticipation, his brother was actually here. The car pulled to a stop, and for a moment nobody moved. William could see Harry's silhouette through the tinted windows, and he wondered if his brother was feeling the same mixture of emotions that was currently overwhelming him. The car door opened, and Harry stepped out slowly, his eyes immediately finding William's. For a heartbeat, the two brothers simply looked at each other, taking in the changes that time and distance had wrought. Harry looked older, more settled, but his eyes still held the warmth and intelligence that William remembered from their childhood. He was dressed simply in a navy jacket and jeans, looking more relaxed than William had seen him in years. Then Harry smiled, the same genuine, slightly crooked smile that had gotten them both out of trouble countless times as children, and the years of separation seemed to melt away. William stepped forward and the brothers embraced, holding each other tightly as emotions that had been suppressed for too long finally found release. You actually came, William whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I said I would, Harry replied, pulling back to look at his brother's face, though I'll admit I was terrified the entire flight. I kept wondering if I was making a huge mistake. You weren't, Catherine said, stepping forward to embrace Harry warmly. Welcome home, Harry. Harry's smile became even brighter as he hugged Catherine. Thank you for everything you did to make this possible. William told me you were the one who convinced him to write the letter. I just reminded him of what he already knew, Catherine replied diplomatically. That family is worth fighting for. As Harry's wife and children emerged from the car, William felt a surge of joy at seeing his nephew and niece, who had grown so much since he'd last seen them. The children seemed excited but overwhelmed by their surroundings, looking around at the ancient castle walls with wide eyes. William knelt down to their level, introducing himself as their uncle and promising to show them all the secret passages and hidden treasures that the castle contained. How is he? Harry asked quietly as they walked toward the castle entrance, referring to their father with a gravity that showed how seriously he was taking the situation. Weaker than when you last saw him, but stronger since he learned you were coming, William replied honestly. He's been talking about your visit constantly. I think it's given him something to focus on besides the illness." They paused at the entrance to the private wing where King Charles was waiting. William could see the nervousness in Harry's eyes, the uncertainty about how this reunion would unfold after so much time apart. "Harry," William said, placing his hand on his brother's shoulder, "he's just happy you're here. Don't worry about saying the perfect thing or acting a certain way. Just be yourself." Harry nodded, taking a deep breath to steady himself. "I've been thinking about what I want to say to him for the entire flight, but now that I'm here, I can't remember any of it." "You don't need prepared words," William assured him. "You just need to be his son." When they entered King Charles's sitting room, William saw his father's face light up with a joy that seemed to take years off his appearance. The king was seated in his favorite armchair, surrounded by books and papers. But all of that was forgotten the moment he saw Harry. Both father and son seemed frozen for a moment, as if they couldn't quite believe this reunion was really happening. "My dear boy," King Charles said finally, his voice filled with wonder and love, "you came home." Harry crossed the room quickly and knelt beside his father's chair, taking the older man's hands in his own. "I'm sorry it took so long, Father." "I'm sorry for all of it." King Charles shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "None of that matters now. What matters is that you're here, that we're together. Look at my sons," he said, glancing between Harry and William with pride. "Look at my beautiful family." William felt his own eyes filling with tears as he watched his father and brother reconnect. This was what King Charles had dreamed of, what he had asked William to make possible. The sight of his family whole again seemed to energize the king in a way that no medical treatment had been able to achieve. Over the next few hours, the family settled into a comfortable rhythm of conversation and shared memories. Harry told stories about his new life, his children's adventures, and the work he was passionate about. King Charles shared updates about royal duties, changes in the country, and his hopes for the future of the monarchy. William found himself relaxing for the first time in months, enjoying the simple pleasure of being surrounded by the people he loved most. As evening approached, Catherine suggested that they all have dinner together in the small private dining room. Just family, no staff, no formality. As they sat around the table, sharing a meal and laughing at stories that spanned decades, William looked at his father and saw something he hadn't seen in months: complete contentment. "This is what I wanted," King Charles said quietly during a pause in the conversation. "This is what I needed to see. My sons together, taking care of each other and our family. Whatever happens next, I can face it knowing that you have each other." Harry reached across the table and took his father's hand. "We're going to have much more time together, Father. This isn't goodbye, this is hello again." William felt his heart swell with gratitude for his brother's words and for the courage it had taken for Harry to come home. The healing that was beginning around this dinner table felt like a miracle, a testament to the power of love to overcome pride and hurt feelings. Their father's final request was being fulfilled in the most beautiful way possible, and William knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as a family. 3 months later, William stood in the same rose garden where he and Harry had played as children. But this time the circumstances were bittersweet. King Charles had passed peacefully in his sleep the night before, surrounded by his family and holding both of his sons' hands. The reunion that had begun with so much hope and healing had given the king exactly what he had wished for: his final months filled with love, laughter, and the joy of seeing his family whole again. Harry had never left after that first visit. He had moved his family to England permanently, choosing love over geographical distance and family over the independence he had worked so hard to achieve. The decision hadn't been easy, and there had been challenges and adjustments along the way. But Harry had told William just weeks before their father's death that coming home was the best decision he had ever made. Now, as William prepared for his father's funeral and his own coronation, he felt the weight of kingship differently than he had ever imagined. Instead of facing these monumental changes alone, he had his brother beside him, offering support, wisdom, and the kind of partnership that only siblings could provide. Harry had found his place in the family again, not as a reluctant royal, but as a devoted son and brother who understood the importance of duty, balanced with authentic living. The funeral service was everything King Charles would have wanted: dignified, meaningful, and filled with the people and causes he had cared about most. World leaders, family members, and representatives from the charities and organizations the king had supported gathered to pay their respects. But for William, the most important moment came when he and Harry walked side by side behind their father's coffin, their steps synchronized, their shoulders straight, their faces reflecting both grief and gratitude. During the service, William read a passage that his father had chosen months earlier, words about love transcending death and family bonds that could never be broken. As he spoke, he could see Harry in the front row, tears streaming down his face, and William felt his father's presence as surely as if the king was standing right beside them. After the service, as the formal ceremonies concluded and the crowds dispersed, the family gathered privately in the same sitting room where King Charles had first asked William to bring Harry home. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. They were back where this journey had begun, but everything had changed. "He got what he wanted," Harry said quietly, his voice filled with wonder and sadness. "He saw us together. He saw his family healed. He saw love win over everything else." William nodded, feeling the truth of his brother's words settling deep in his heart. "I keep thinking about that conversation we had, the one where he told me about his final request. I was so scared that it was impossible, that too much damage had been done. But he believed in us even when we didn't believe in ourselves." Catherine, who had been the quiet strength holding everyone together throughout the difficult months, spoke with the wisdom that had guided their family through this entire journey. He knew that love was stronger than pride, that family bonds could survive anything if people were willing to fight for them. He just needed you both to remember that. Over the following weeks, as William adjusted to his new role as king, and Harry settled into his role as devoted brother and uncle, they established new traditions and ways of being together that honored both their father's memory and their own growth. Harry became William's closest advisor, the person he could trust completely to tell him the truth even when it was difficult to hear. They instituted weekly family dinners, times when they could set aside royal duties and simply be brothers, fathers, and husbands. The children, who had grown close during Harry's return, played together in the same gardens where their fathers had once explored, creating new memories while honoring old ones. One evening, 6 months after King Charles's death, William and Harry found themselves walking through those same rose gardens, their conversation meandering through memories, current challenges, and dreams for the future. The roses were in full bloom just as they had been during so many of their childhood adventures. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Father hadn't gotten sick?" Harry asked, stopping beside the old oak tree where they had built their childhood fort. William considered the question carefully. "I think we would have found our way back to each other eventually. But I'm grateful we didn't have to wait that long. I'm grateful Father pushed us to heal while he was still here to see it." Harry smiled, the same crooked grin that had charmed their way out of trouble so many times. He was always smarter than we gave him credit for. He knew exactly what he was doing when he asked you to write that letter. He knew his sons, William agreed. He knew that underneath all the hurt and misunderstanding we still loved each other. He just gave us permission to act on that love. As they walked back toward the castle, their children's laughter echoing from the windows above, William felt his father's approval like a warm breeze. King Charles's final request had been fulfilled beyond his wildest dreams. Not only had his sons been reunited, but they had built something stronger and more authentic than what they had lost. The next morning, William began his royal duties with a new sense of purpose and confidence. He had his brother's support, his family's love, and the knowledge that even in the face of life's greatest challenges, love could triumph over everything else. King Charles's legacy lived on not just in the institutions he had served, but in the healed family he had left behind. Proof that sometimes the most important royal duty was simply being a good father and brother. Harry joined William in his office that morning, ready to begin another day of working together for the future of their family and their country. They had learned that being unprepared for life's biggest challenges didn't matter as much as being willing to face them together, with love as their guide and their father's wisdom as their foundation. King Charles's last request had seemed impossible when he first voiced it, but it had become the beginning of something beautiful, a family reunited stronger than ever, and ready to honor his memory by choosing love over everything else that tried to divide them.